Welcome everybody to our next session as part of the S4HANA Product Success Delta training. We are very excited to welcome you to today's presentation of the SAP S4HANA Cloud Customer Care team together with members of Deloitte, and they will give an update on the Americas project. So with that, I'm about to hand over to the first speaker. Before I do, please remember that the session is being recorded and you can find the recording together with all other information from the Delta training on our landing page. After the presentation, there will be time for a live Q&A, and you can enter your questions at any point in time in the Q&A function that you find in the bottom of your screen. Please do not use the chat, but use the Q&A, and then your questions will be answered by our experts. And with that, I'm very happy to hand over to our first speaker, Jens Klavitter, our product expert from SAP Americas.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. My name is Jens Klavitter. I'm a product expert supporting SAP S4HANA Cloud customers here in the Americas region. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the Cloud Customer Care Americas session. With me here today, we have 4 colleagues from Deloitte who will talk about a project which went recently live in March of this year. Deloitte and SAP successfully collaborated on this project to implement S4HANA Cloud in a 2-tier deployment for a large customer in the food and beverage industry. Before I hand this over to our colleagues from Deloitte, I'd like to share some information with you about SAP's Cloud Customer Care organization here in the Americas. Like I said, before I hand this over to our colleagues from Deloitte, I'd just like to share a couple of information from our customer care organization here in the Americas. So our Cloud Customer Care team is an international team. We got 24 product experts, which are located in 5 different countries. They're supporting customers in 8 different countries across the region. So far this year, we successfully set S4HANA Cloud live in 12 implementations. One of the most notable one was the first go live we had based on CVC. We were able to implement or set a customer here in North America live from the automotive industry in just 13 weeks in a 100% remote implementation. So successful collaboration with our partners is a crucial component of all these implementations. So 75% of our go lives are partner led. We have a total of 30 active partners in our region. The projects supported by us raised a total of 86 impediments this year. You see a breakdown on the bottom, 32 incidents or impediments were successfully completed or they are planned for delivery. 28 requests are still ongoing and 26 requests were canceled. So on this slide, you see an overview of where in the region our product experts are located. I would also like to introduce or mention the name of our regional lead for customer care, Esther Fries. She also serves as the global head for Cloud Customer Care. Esther is supported in a role by Nicole Fuller and Barbara Bitterle. So some of the highlights you see on the bottom, I already previously mentioned, like the 13-week fully remote implementation for our CVC customer. Our team is now actually working on preparing with existing customers to work on their migration towards the central business configuration. So on the next slide. So on this slide, you see an overview of the SAP customer lifecycle, and it highlights the team members and their responsibilities in this process. The SAP team consists of a customer engagement executive, a customer success manager, and a product experts, where the implementation partner could be an external partner like Deloitte or SAP services. So all parties collaborate together with the customer to ensure the successful implementation of SAP S4HANA Cloud. As a product expert, one of my responsibilities is to guide the implementation partner through the SAP implementation methodology Activate and through our best practices. So next you will hear from our partner Deloitte, with whom I worked in this capacity. So without further ado, I would like to hand it over to you, Juan Manuel.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much for the invite and for the opportunity to share this experience. We've been really working together very close, and it's been a really amazing experience for the last year. So with that said, Sammy, we move to the next slide. This is what we want to cover in the next about 40 minutes. So of course, that's when you hear this specific client story, consumer business with main operations in the US, but also with international operations, mainly with the purpose of receiving and supply finished goods to their operation in the US. So that's actually very key when we start going into the why and how we did it. And basically to go into what was our two-tier model, because we know two-tier can mean different things, can mean different complexities, can be done in different ways. And we want to share how we did it for this specific client, how we did it according to specific requirements. Of course, this is not the only way to do it. This is the way we did it with the client, and we explain the reason behind it. We'll go into what's the overall scope that we cover from a functional and integration perspective. What was the timeline? Because again, since we were dealing with bigger complexity of just a Cloud Essentials implementation, you will see that the timeline is much bigger, but it's also aligned with the on-prem solution that we already had in progress. We'll also share some experience about the use of methodology. Definitely the use of SAP methodology was key, but we also had some methodology for our ongoing program from a global perspective that we need to do a hybrid approach to use the best of both worlds. We also cover some of the integrations so that you have an idea about how many integrations, how did we integrate, what's the technology that we use and why. And last, we will share about what were the main lessons learned and client adoption challenges that we face, because with this type of solution, there's a lot of business adoption and business buy-in that needs to be done. And I would say that this is one of the biggest learning experience that we had during all this whole program. So with that said, we'll do a quick introduction of the team that we have today. So I'll start. My name is Juan Manuel Garcia, Senior Manager out of Indianapolis office with Deloitte Consulting, and mainly focus on delivery of SAP global projects for the last 20 years. And really the first time working with this complex and very interesting two-tier model that we are going to be presenting here. With that, I'll pass it to Gopi.
Hey, this is Gopinath Gade. I am a specialist leader from Atlanta. I have around 20 years of SAP technology experience, and I focus mainly from a technical aspect of the project to deliver the projects. And I have been in this industry of consumer products, TMT and whatnot. This is my first two-tier architecture implementation from an SAP perspective.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Gopi. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Holloway. I'm a manager out of the Chicago office with Deloitte. My background is in the accounting and finance space, both starting off as an end user with SAP, but certainly an integrator as well. So I've been implementing SAP products from accounting and finance perspective for the past 10 years.
And hey, I'll round off the group. Thank you all for allowing us to be here today. It's great that we get to present. My name is Sam Lundahl. I'm an analyst here at the firm, coming up on 1 year exactly, almost to the date. Throughout this last year, I've been able to participate in several transformations of S4HANA in both the supply chain as well as the finance space for consumer products companies. And as we're going to talk about today, one of those implementations had to do with this very unique and special one with our two-tier implementation of SAP Cloud.
Okay, thank you very much. We move to the next one. So, okay, let's start with what exactly was two-tier for our client and for our project, and why, which I think that's one of the main questions that even we had when we started the project. Why should we do a normal template, a normal rollout of the existing template and the existing solutions in the countries? We're going to be talking about 3 countries, 2 in the Asia Pacific region, 1 in Europe. So originally, should we do it as a normal, traditional extension deployment, or can we do it as a two-tier based on the nature of the operations? And this is actually one of the key decision points that you'll see in our lessons learned, especially at the end. So if we move. So how we started and what was the concept of the two-tier transformation model for our client and our project? So we had a fully functional S4 traditional S4HANA solution that was running for the client in the main operation in the US, and operation in North America, in Canada and in Mexico as well. And when we discussed about the deployment and we were into deepest detail of the nature of the client, we found that those countries that I was mentioning, those 3 countries, the main purpose was to provide and to supply finished goods to the headquarters and to the main operations in the US. It was not necessarily extensions, it was not necessarily local operation of the global model. It was basically different organizations that were part from an overall corporate perspective, but did not necessarily follow or had to follow the same processes and policies at the same level of detail. And that was a key decision point to decide, can we go with something lighter, simpler, and different? Do we need to bring these small operations into the whole landscape, into the whole end-to-end solution that we are building for the US? Probably not. And we had an organization there that was totally different in terms of profile, in terms of headcount. So a project as big as the one that we were doing for US, we found that it would be very overwhelming to these smaller, very specific markets. If we go to the next one, please. So that's why from the different scenarios that you may see in SAP documentation, we went with the headquarters and subsidiary, whereas as mentioned, we would have these 3 countries with the subsidiary model that would have certain integrations that we'll explain in detail, with the main operation and with the main reporting from a reporting perspective that needs to be done from a global perspective. But operationally, they could be more independent than if they were in the same box. We go to the next one, please. So, and how these organizations also were part of the bigger enterprise that we had with the client. Most of them were actually through acquisitions. So that's why we're talking about countries or organizations that were not just different from a system perspective, they were different in terms of even the way they operate. They were operating in a different way, and there was actually no complete intention for the client to bring the operation to a global standardized way. So that's one of the key points. And also because they keep growing in terms of acquisitions, divestitures. So we needed to, or the client wanted to have some way of having an organic growth with an existing subsidiary or with new businesses that could be deployed in a shorter time, and with no impact to the US operations in terms of regression testing, for example, where that could be disruption to the big operation in the US. So that was another factor we considered there. If we go to the next one. So as mentioned, what was identified? Well, definitely instant value, accelerated go live compared to the overall program, and even seeing it from a future perspective. And actually, we are working together with our client to bring another business unit into the existing cloud model, and it's going to be much faster than having a deployment in the traditional way. It was rapid, it was quickly to adapt to the new business needs. They had access to the latest technologies because of the methodology of having regular upgrades, get the latest from best practices, keep up with regulatory changes. In the solution already had localizations, so we didn't have to deal with a lot of the issues that or the situations that we traditionally deal in the S4HANA traditional deployments. Better transparency and fully managed by a trusted third party. So that was also very key, that the client didn't need to deal with more from a technical perspective basis. We had a system that was ready to start basically when we started the project, which was a big differentiation from a deployment time perspective. Overall scope from a functional perspective. So as mentioned, it was a multinational deployment across multiple continents, supported by that two-tier S4HANA architecture model. You will see that another important decision was that we had two cloud systems depending on the regions. So it's not just one cloud that is communicated with the on-prem solution. Actually, we have two cloud solutions that are communicated with the main on-prem solution. And one of the challenges was to keep those two cloud solutions on sync as well. And as mentioned, they were part of a bigger program. So it was also needed to have integration with BPC for planning and consolidation perspective, SAP Treasury because of central operations that are dealt in the United States, and integration also with local system using cloud platform and MuleSoft that Gopi is going to give us more detail. And also we included master data synchronization and global data governance. That was one of the most challenging parts because at the end we were dealing with three different solutions from a technical perspective, but we wanted to make sure that there was governance from a data perspective, that we are talking about, especially with the key components of vendors, customers, materials, so that they are not seen as a totally different solutions. Intercompany, which you will see was one of our key process, and localization requirements across geography were part of the deployment of each one of the solutions in the countries. Overall, these were the processes that we have. So you'll see that for the first two countries, they were in the same region and were very similar. The number of scope item activated were basically the same, 235. And the third country in Europe has a bigger and heavier localization, and also a different operation. So we had a little bit more scope items, 257. But overall, what we covered was the basic end-to-end operation. Finance, including planning, consolidation, profitability, and integration with the on-prem solution, cash and payments, local sales office, intercompany operations, not only from the subsidiary to the main headquarters or even between subsidiaries. So we had actually the cloud solutions also talking to each other, procurement to pay, external and internal as part of those intercompany process. And in one of the countries, the country number 3, and that was the difference, we had manufacturing operations, full manufacturing operations. That's one of the reasons of why we had more scope items included as part of the program. So with that said, pass it to Sam to give us more inputs about how long, because you may wonder, how long did that take to be done? How did you synchronize that from a program perspective with the overall deployment? Did you go live together? Did you go live at a different time? And this is what we're going to be covering now, and how we made use of SAP and our methodology to make it happen. Sam?
Yeah, definitely. I'll do my best to answer that question that you might have. So we'll continue to set the stage for the conversation regarding this two-tier transformation from cloud to on-premise. But what we have to do is we have to take a look at this timeline of the project to see what a specific project of this nature comes to be in regards to timeline. So the example set on your screen is our actual timeline from our project. As you can see, the timeline has two separate components. The top part containing the details of the on-premise implementation, and the bottom containing the details of the two international S4 cloud implementations. These components had two different starting points, as you can see. The explore phase of the S4 on-premise implementation started in January of 2020, while the same phase for the two international S4 cloud implementations did not start until late June. So this is almost a 5 to 6 month delay. And in my opinion, as Juan was mentioning earlier, the key call out from this slide is that despite the delayed start for the cloud solutions, these components of the timeline were able to come together for a joint go live on the same exact day. That's 3 instances. That's on-premise, country 1 and country 2, all on the same day. This was possible due to the fact that SAP Cloud can simply be implemented faster, as much of the system can be taken directly out of the box. So now let's move on to the next slides, where I can continue to touch on how the methodology that we used, as well as the specific features of cloud that allowed us to condense our implementation timelines to deliver these 2 separate instances of cloud with a 5-6 month delay on the same day as that larger on-premise implementation. First, let's begin by diving into the Activate methodology, also known as the double-click or fit to standard approach. This approach strongly encourages clients to consider standard processes from the get-go. Due to the nature of cloud, as you may know, there's simply not much customization that can be done. So with this in mind, we decided to implement the Activate methodology because it fit the bill perfectly for our implementation. Now, let me explain what applying this methodology looked like for us on our project. Prior to our workshops, we had to ensure that we were adequately prepared to provide the most value from cloud to our client. And so we provided the business with questionnaires regarding their particular business processes. After we were able to review these responses and highlight the client's needs, the business process experts compared and matched these findings with the SAP best practice scope content of cloud. So from this information, we were able to plan our fit to standard workshops, which during these workshops, we explained the functionalities of these scope items and how they were able to meet the client's specific requirements. We also had the business process experts execute the demonstrated scenarios from these workshops in the starter system. Once complete, we documented our findings, which included our fits and gaps, ultimately leading to the confirmation of our scope and building of our backlog. We also compiled our list of integrations as well as our landscape overview. And from there, we began the actual configuration of the system based on this backlog that we were able to capture during the fit to standard workshops. So by using this Activate methodology, we were able to leverage and embrace the fit to standard nature of SAP Cloud and design 2 separate systems on an accelerated timeline. So as I mentioned earlier, the Activate methodology was not the only reason why we were able to implement on such an accelerated timeline. We also leveraged some of the key features of SAP Cloud that Juan touched on a little bit earlier, but I'll go into a little more detail. So first off, SAP Cloud is scope driven. This means that the system comes with prepackaged, ready to use right out of the box, transactions and processes that suit the client's needs. Now it's up for the client as well as the project team to decide which of these are applicable, but no matter what the results are, they're more than likely ready to plug and chug. A great benefit of cloud is that majority of these scope items are actually included in the licensing itself, with only a few that require additional licensing provisioning. Another key feature is that new scope items are released each quarter, thus always increasing the capabilities of cloud. However, one thing that you do need to keep in mind during an implementation of this magnitude is that the scope items do vary from country to country, which does help with specific regulations and requirements of localities. However, you need to make sure that what you need is in the country that you need. And this, again, was a key consideration for our implementation, considering we were dealing with 3 separate countries. So going down to the box below, I've already touched on the methodology that we used that allowed us for this rapid implementation of SAP Cloud. However, there are some events that we needed to consider during this implementation that are a little different than the standard on-premise implementations. The first being an event or series of events that are called queue gates. These events are where SAP provides feedback and formally reviews your solution to determine its integrity as well as preparedness for go live. These queue gates serve as fantastic opportunities for you to get a pulse check to ensure that your system is on the right path and that you're tracking the plan. The next event to consider, especially during configuration, are the SAP mandated quarterly upgrades. During these upgrades, as I mentioned earlier, the system is getting new scope items as well as improvements. However, this does come with a cost, and that being that production is out for that time. Normally, it does occur over a weekend. So your team must be prepared and plan for these outages, as it could interfere with your plans. Other key callouts that you can see on the right side of the screen are that standard cloud only provides 1 non-production and 1 production environment. This means that all development and testing must be completed in the non-production environment. And from there, another feature of cloud is that all configuration must be moved together. So anything that's ready for transport is going to go in 1 swoop. Lastly, any coding, updates, or minimal customization that may be allowed is relying on SAP. This will be delivered during hot fixes or well as the quarterly upgrades. So again, these must be planned for and prepared for. So overall, the combination of the methodology we used, as well as the key features of SAP Cloud that I just mentioned, enabled us to transform the business in this rapid time period and meet up with that larger on-premise implementation, despite our 5 to 6 month start behind. So to wrap this up on my part, let's briefly touch on the specific tools that enabled our team to complete this project. So we use Deloitte proprietary tools for our PMO work, whether that be tracking risks, actions, issues, decisions, as well as the overall project plan. We use Octane for the management of our user stories. And then lastly, all of our testing was coordinated and executed through HP ALM. This allowed for traceability, as well as our team to collaborate on tracking our tests, as well as defect resolution. So with all that being said, I'll pass it over to Gopi for some more insights into our integrations.
Okay. So next couple of slides, I will walk through the actual technical architecture and technical approach we have adopted for this two-tier hybrid solution which we have did. So one of the first consideration when we were looking at how we will be doing this so that we will achieve what we need to achieve as part of the overall business solution, but at the same time gain the key consideration of overall approach. So one of the key considerations when we have looked this from a technical perspective was how we can keep our digital core clean. Because overall, when we have looked at our bigger project which we were doing, the key principles of our main implementation which we were doing was one, how we can achieve fit to standards, how we can keep our core clean, and how we can implement the project with a no-code, low-code approach. So with that three consideration, when we got the use case of using two-tier architecture, it got fit into completely of our guidelines, which says that this approach, when we are having separate countries coming into our on-premise solution, may have to do a lot of development to meet their custom requirements, localized requirement, and many other solutions which they have built in-house for their particular requirement. So to decouple that from our core solution, which was our digital core on-premise solution, we agreed that this two-tier architecture would be a right solution where we can completely decouple our core system with the other new subsidiaries which we are coming. So when we started the overall approach, we thought initially we can go with one single instance, but as we were looking at the requirement which was coming from different local countries, we thought that instead of having one cloud subsidiary, it will be better to have separate countries which will help them to attain their functional requirements. At the same time, they can do their localization and customization in the same country-specific cloud instances. Now, though they have separate cloud instances for each country, we still had one integration layer, and we have used our CPI layer, the cloud platform integration layer, to integrate the on-premise system to the cloud system. In a bigger schema, our client actually had MuleSoft as their integrator tool, which I will discuss later, but in the context of this slide, though we had the MuleSoft as the bigger integrator tool from an enterprise perspective, but to have a SAP to SAP integration and to use the content provided by SAP so that our overall TCO is less, we have used HANA Cloud Platform to integrate our two SAP instances, cloud and on-premises. And the main focus of this integration were the master data and the transactional data. As earlier one was saying that the master data synchronization was the key so that the transaction data which we have to flow will get seamless and have a governance in process. We have used for master data, we have used DRF framework as an initial load, and then we have initiated the DRF framework to do the master data synchronization between cloud and on-premise system. Now, apart from master data, we also had a lot of transaction data flowing between these two systems to meet a lot of the intercompany requirements, which was like synchronous call at the same time, all group reporting and the BPC consolidations for which we have to send our financial actuals between these two systems, and there was a big volume-based integration with respect to transactions. So this was the reason which we have attained, mainly digital core clean, second no-code, low-code approach, and then have clean ERP approach. So these were the three considerations which we have met by using our two-tier architecture with headquarter and subsidiary approach of two-tier architecture. Can you go to the next slide, Sam, please? Now, from an integration guidelines perspective, from an integration approach, we had completely API-led approach. We had a concept of using the reusable integration so that the overall TCO is less and the delivery of each integrations are fast. And apart from, even before we use S4HANA cloud and our cloud, within our on-premise also, we have used all whitelisted APIs, event-driven integration so that we keep our core clean. So that became very handy when we have started using S4HANA cloud, because that was the only option when we deal with S4HANA cloud to integrate. Either you use the whitelisted APIs or you expose CDS views to integrate with any other systems. Now, if you see on your right side here, we have so many different types of integrations and integration patterns we have. So overall, we had about 60 plus integrations which we have done, but the core, digital core, when you say two-tier core integration was 12, where we have done a lot of master data integration and we have done transaction. Apart from this SAP to SAP instances, we did integration with Concur, where we have used a native connector to connect with our cloud platform. We did very good, heavy integration with SAP IBP, where we have added the CPI DS components also to integrate on-premise, the cloud system with our cloud SAP IBP solution. And then we had, since we had MuleSoft, and MuleSoft has so many integrations already developed in the on-premise solution, we have reused those integration to meet country-specific requirements to integrate with their local 3PLs or warehouses or any other needs. On whole, we had a mix of integration tools to achieve this functionality of integration. And MuleSoft was the client's main integrator tool, which we have used heavily for cloud and non-SAP system integration. But between cloud to SAP, we have used SAP CPI for our overall integration. Next slide, please. So this shows very high level of our integration architecture. I'm focusing more from a two-tier systems perspective, where we have exposed the only way to get the data from the cloud system was APIs and CDS. So we have extensively used those APIs and CDS, and our integration layers, like you see here, we had CPI for main SAP cloud to on-premise. We have CPI DS, CPI CIG to integrate with all Concur, Ariba, and IBP solutions on the cloud. MuleSoft was in the game, and we also use MDC, the multi-bank connectivity, to connect with banks. Overall, if you look at this integration layer, now in the new world, we will be using the BTP layer integration suite. But when we had done, we had used SAP Cloud Platform and SAP CPI to integrate our system and again our concepts of clean core, fit to standards, and a low code, no code approach. And with this, I hand over to Jonathan for the functional integration part of our solution.
Thanks, Gopi. If we want to flip to the next slide. So I think we've touched on this a little bit. But in terms of synchronization of data, right, Cloud Essentials to S4HANA, at our particular client, we had a centralized reporting platform. So synchronization of master data and transactional data was absolutely critical. And for time's sake, I won't touch on every single one of these, but we'll just kind of hit it high level. So when we think about synchronization of data from Cloud Essentials to on-premise, starting with the enterprise structure, some of the configuration that we did in Cloud Essentials, for example, company codes, ledgers, sales orgs, purchasing orgs, that information was also maintained in on-premise. So syncing up your company code, numbering, nomenclature, ledgers from a mapping perspective, right? Local to US GAAP to local, and kind of syncing up from a centralized reporting perspective was absolutely quintessential in this process. So enterprise structure elements, again, syncing up, knowing what you need to set up in on-premise that you also set up in the cloud platform as well. When we move on to master data, again, general ledger accounts, depending upon the approach, if it's set up from a global perspective, if it's more of a local chart of accounts, syncing up is absolutely critical. We run into some headaches in that space in terms of ensuring that our local entities that we're using Cloud Essentials were synced up from a chart of accounts perspective, mapping, whether it's one-to-one, whether it's many-to-one, and syncing that information up so that those financials can flow freely from Cloud Essentials to on-prem. So very critical, and along the same lines, profit center master data, cost center master data, right? Just master data in general, just knowing what your approach is. And in our instance, again, centralized reporting was key. So making sure that we're synced up with the local teams and setting up profit centers, cost centers, attributes from a reporting perspective. That was all highly important. And it sounds easy, right? But you just need to think about those things up front. And then when we talk about kind of how often the data flows, so we were sending financial information from Essentials to on-prem on a daily basis, and just thinking about some of the nuances. So for example, at work breakdown structures, we had a lot of capitalization of assets, kind of interim holding accounts, prior to month end, prior to settling costs. And then making sure we were syncing up. So when we were sending the financial information from cloud to on-premise, setting WBSs up and on-premise to hold that information. So again, thinking about the synchronization of that master data. And then of course, your business partners, your customers, your vendors, how you set those up. We were eliminating from a consolidations perspective, there was a lot of intercompany scenarios. So trading partners from an elimination perspective was of course critical. Again, sounds easy, but just making sure you're synced up in that regard. And then certainly material product hierarchy from a reporting perspective was key as well. If we flip to the next slide, talk a little bit about transactional data, right? So I think we've touched on this. We're feeding financial information. We were feeding financial information from Cloud Essentials to on-premise. We were summarizing financials. So again, just thinking of how you would integrate one system to another, sending financials from one system to another, thinking about that from a similar perspective when we were sending financials. So we would summarize financial data from Cloud Essentials to on-premise and rolling it up in certain ways. But when looking at the individual transactions, again, what's key is the type of transaction. So in our instance, we had a lot of intercompany scenarios. And so that intercompany versus that third party scenario was pretty critical in terms of understanding how that's going to work. Again, trading partners, ensuring those things are populated. We had some instances from a testing perspective where the TP wasn't populating on line items. And so again, stuff that's pretty preventable, but just making sure you're syncing up and thinking about that in terms of your approach, ensuring things go smoothly as well. The other thing to mention about the intercompany versus the third party scenarios is the types of integrations that are required. So, we would have an entity in on-premise that was doing business with an entity in Cloud Essentials. So what types of automation or manual processes, triggering of POs, triggering of sales orders, we built some processes around that as well. So that's the other point to mention. And then I think we talked about it at the beginning, centralized processes, right? If you're centralizing treasury, transactions, execution, AP, whatever the shared services, for example, that you may have, you got to think about as well, how is that going to work? Again, centralizing versus local transactions. And in our instance, treasury, execution treasury was a corporate function, so that was actually maintained in on-premise. So treasury was executed on behalf of the entities in the Cloud Essentials solution. If we want to flip to the next slide, please. Yeah, so, and you can flip to the next one. So just a little about, in terms of kind of the considerations, what are some of the challenges that we went through, and really to kind of take us home on the entire topic, right? What we learned from the process was kind of setting those expectations early. And this really goes along with the next bullet, right? So Cloud Essentials enables you to implement and execute quicker, right, than you would with an on-premise solution. But you have to think about a few of those kind of nuances different between the products. So the ability to customize, for example, is more limited in the Cloud Essentials solution. And so that can be a good thing, right? Ensuring that we're using standard functionality as much as possible. But there was a little bit of confusion between teams, how that's going to work, what can I do in Cloud Essentials, and really kind of ensuring that standard functionality, level setting those expectations up front is key, right? So you're not going to build a Frankenstein in the system, right? So you really need to focus on standard functionality. So kind of level setting is pretty critical. And again, along with that, some of the differences in the functionality, I wouldn't say significant in our case, but the few nuances, right? So internal orders, for example, not available in the Cloud Essentials solution, have to work with projects. There was a little bit of confusion about that. In our on-premise solution, we use both projects, WBSs, and internal orders. In Cloud Essentials, again, sticking with projects. So evaluating your business processes is important to do up front and understanding some of those differences. And again, we use costing and profitability analysis, account-based COBA from a reporting perspective. Some differences there, again, a little more rigid in the Cloud Essentials solution. So it's just important to think through some of those elements. And then I talked about the intercompany processes. Again, what's happening in cloud versus on-premise? What types of integrations are you looking to do, et cetera? And then finally, I would say one of the most important aspects, and we'll talk about this in the next section around lessons learned, but who owns the requirements? Is the global team driving the requirements for the local teams utilizing the Cloud Essentials solution? Is it a mix of central versus local? In our case, global teams were driving the reporting requirements. So that drove a lot of the integrations, a lot of the setup of master data and configuration. So again, easier said than done, but very critical to understand who's really driving that design, those requirements. So again, these points are just considerations and things to think about. And if we flip to the next one, I believe we're going to close it out with just a little bit around lessons learned. So just from my perspective, I talked about this, but reporting, understand your reporting requirements early. That drove our integration. Again, we had a centralized reporting solution. So understanding your reporting requirements early is important in terms of kind of building out your Cloud Essentials platform configuration solution. And with that, I'll pass it on to Juan.
Yeah. So from and those I think those opinions are based on the different tracks that we were in charge of. So from a project management perspective, definitely one of the key areas was defining if the subsidiary was a right candidate for being deployed using the solution. And that I am going to be very honest, we had our questions, especially about one of the countries where the requirements kept increasing. And then we question ourselves, we discuss with SAP, was that the right approach to go with cloud instead of having a normal deployment? But that's linked to what Jonathan mentioned about setting the expectations. Once we set the expectations in terms of like, there's a difference not only in the timing, it's in the resources, it's in developments, it's in budget, because the cost is totally different. So the client was, again, aligned with the approach. But this initial part of assessing your business case, it is really important, and evaluate the level of integrations that you will have to see if maybe this is not the option. The option is to go with a traditional deployment. Copy from an integration perspective.
From integration perspective, because we had a MuleSoft as our first integration tool, we had developed a lot of our content in MuleSoft layer. But when we went to this approach of two-tier architecture, it was kind of more difficult for the client to explain them, saying that why they need to use HANA CPI as their integration tool, why not MuleSoft? So to explain them, saying that we can use the content provided by HCI, the iFlows and whatnot from out of the box, it was one learning curve for the client to make sure that understand, though whatever you have as your integration layer, the CPI is the way to go. And one thing which we have realized about the master data replication is we have used DRF, but it replicates only basic data. Then we have to bring in a robust governance process after replicating the basic data, how we can add the additional data which would be required for other functionalities or the custom fields which we have added. Finally, one thing which we have realized is using HANA Cloud Platform was really very handy to meet their local requirement. Why, right then when we were doing the BTP was not there, but now when we see BTP, we would have done even better what we can do from a business technology platform perspective. Sam, you.
Yeah, thanks, Gopi. Just to kind of round out the points, as this point has been discussed throughout multiple of the sections that we covered today, and it's crucial to the success of a two-tier implementation. It's setting that master data governance strategy from the onset, from the very beginning, and making sure that the owners are clearly defined, as well as that there's consistency in the data, whether it be from the on-premise or cloud solution communicating back and forth. As if you stray from your strategy or if you don't have a strong one, there's going to be serious implementations to your interfaces and the overall success of the program.
Okay, with that said, and I think this is the last one. So really thank you very much for the opportunity, and we have some minutes in case of any question from the audience here.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So at the end of the presentation, as said, this is now your opportunity to ask any questions to our presenters. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. So again, if you would like to ask a question, please use the button at the bottom of your screen, and presenters will be happy to answer anything. So thanks a lot that you liked the session. We hope you all did. In case you joined late or you would like to recommend the session to someone else, please guide them to the landing page where we will make the recordings available. And now I see question coming up. The question is, can you speak on the connection with BPC in two-tier?
Jonathan, do you want to take that? Or
I mean, I could speak about it from a functional perspective. So, you know, the way it worked for two-tier is, you know, BPC was connected directly. And again, this is a non-technical person talking, but BPC was connected directly to S4HANA. So again, we had a centralized reporting approach, and our financials from a Cloud Essentials perspective fed S4HANA, and all the financials rolled up then into BPC. So essentially we fed financial information into on-premise, into AC DACA, into the Universal Journal, and that information then fed into BPC. So that's the way we had it set up for our client.
I mean, Jonathan, I can, because we did try about using the guide BPC, but I think that was not available or it was having some issues. I cannot recollect, but the way in which we have done is we have moved our cloud data to AC DACA through APIs, but we have to do some consolidation at the HCI level. So we have done some aggregation and consolidation at the HCI level to aggregate that from cloud and send it to on-premise, which were further pushed to the BPC layer to the natural inbox extractors for the final reporting.
Thank you. We have another question. Did the customer ever ask for a future public cloud system? Meaning moving the two-tier strategy to become mainstream?
No, not as of now. And I think, as mentioned, this was part of the discussions at the beginning because of the nature of the organizations here. So the nature of the local business was very different to what happens on the headquarters, and that's why it makes sense to do that. If they would have like in any a real global company where there's a local operation of the same processes, maybe we have gone in a different directions. But in here, we were talking about really different organizations, different companies. I wouldn't even go to the part of like the different, even the internal culture and procedures itself are very different. So that's why, and the customer wanted to keep that level of independence at the country level. So that's why this type of solution approach was used. So I don't think they had the intention. And actually, as I mentioned, the approach is that for those smaller businesses, which basically the main purpose is to produce finished goods in order to supply to the main headquarters for the sale in the US, that's what they are doing. So we are actually working with them in planning another deployment of a similar approach in a different country. So no, there's no plans for bringing them. It would be also disruptive from a US perspective in terms of regression roles, even some SOX processes that were reviewed. So no.
Thank you. Then the next question is, did the customer ask for a central finance for the two-tier deployment?
It was evaluated at some point in time when we had the BPC integration. We actually, as Gopi is mentioning, we had three options. We had integration with BPC directly from the cloud solutions. We had the option that we went to, that was the replication of financial documents at a summary level, or at some point we evaluated central finance. So central finance at the end was not decided because of timing, complexity, cost, and really, as mentioned, the real need of the customer at that point was to being able to consolidate at that aggregated level. They did not necessarily want to have the level of detail at the document level that central finance provides. That was not their requirement. So that's why that approach was not used. But technically, it could have been possible, and it was evaluated as well.
Thank you. We have a next question. Based on your experience, do you believe customers that decided on a single instance years ago should now look at two-tier?
I think this, and feel free that the rest of the team to chime in here, but it really depends on defining the nature of the operation of the subsidiary. And we are working with other clients, for example, that in similar industry where they have specific operation in small markets. And we are evaluating this option because it's a specific operation basically for covering sales. They don't have the same types of processes, and really bringing the whole solution for a country that is really even not staffed for that solution, because that was sort of the discussion. I mean, the country itself, the same person did a lot of things, or we didn't have the segregation of duties like we had in the main headquarters. So it was too much for the market. So yeah, that was, I wouldn't say that necessarily they should move. It depends on the operation. If you are trying to bring a different operation to the same model, I would definitely, or we would definitely recommend to look at this approach, because it makes me more complicated trying to make fit something that naturally doesn't fit.
Thank you so much. So then we have all questions. Oh, one more question, and this will be the last one then. What tools do you advise to use for a two-tier deployment outside of SAP Activate?
Tools in terms of methodology, I would assume. And in that case, from a program perspective, as Sam mentioned in one of the slides that we have there, we use HPALM actually from a program perspective, because at the end we were driving a program. And that's the part where it was challenging. We were driving a program that was using two solutions, the on-prem and the cloud. But from a program perspective, it was a single program. So we use the same tools for program management. We use the same tool for testing, recording, testing traceability. We use the same tools for traceability of requirements, for requirements logging. So I think that was I would say that was good approach from our side to keep everything under control, because at some point for the business and for the client, and even honestly for our team, was disruptive to have the two solutions at the same time, two solutions with a different approach. And once we standardize that governance and that use of the tools, it makes our lives much more easier.
Thank you very much. So then we have reached the end of our presentation today. I would like to thank all speakers who have contributed and who have presented, shared their experiences. I would like to thank all the participants for engaging in a lively Q&A. And I would very much appreciate to see you again in one of our upcoming sessions. Tomorrow, it will be the last day of the Delta training. And as always, please check back to our landing page for upcoming sessions and recordings of the previous ones. So with that, we can close the session. Thank you all and have a great remaining day.